Resourceful Designer, episode 258, Bartering Your Design Services for Exposure.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host. Every once in a while, he'll start singing Row, Row, Row Your Boat for no apparent reason. Mark Descote.
Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. No, never claimed to be a singer. Anyways, in this week's episode, I'm going to talk about bartering your design services for exposure and how, contrary to popular belief, it is something I suggest you do. Bear with me, you won't regret it. And after that conversation, I'm going to share a great tool to help you get exposure, so stick around for that. So, bartering design services for exposure. Working for exposure. That thought is, well, the bane of most designers. A client comes to you and asks for your valuable time, your skills, something that'll benefit them. And in exchange, they're going to tell everyone they know about the great services you offer. It's a win-win for both of you. They promise you fame and fortune if only you do this project for them for free or a vast discount. Well, let me tell you, that's a crock if you ask me, or if you ask any other designer for that matter. Most of us have been presented with some sort of offer similar to that in the past, and we can all tell you that it's never worth it. Those clients just don't care about you, and they will never, ever be advocates of your service. And if by chance they do end up telling somebody about you, it'll be in the context of, oh yeah, just offer them free exposure and they'll give you a great deal. Now, is that really the reputation you want as a designer? Of course it isn't. You should never agree to a request to exchange your services for exposure. But that's not the same thing as you bartering for exposure. Let me ask you a question. You've probably spent some time, if not a great deal of time, stuck at home during the 2020 pandemic. Now, during all that time, did you ever order out for a meal? And how many times did you order from a restaurant you had never heard of before? Now, I don't mean a place you recently found out about through family, friends, or colleagues. I mean, how many times did you order from a restaurant you had never heard of? Well, of course, that's a trick question. If you've never heard of the place, how are you supposed to order from them? Well, the same thing applies to your design business. Nobody is going to hire you if they don't know you exist. Sure, they can Google designers in your area and stumble across your website, and that might be all they need to reach out and hire you. But that requires intent. The person needs to actively be seeking a designer for that to happen. But how can you let that person know about you when they're not actively seeking a designer? The only way to do that is through exposure. Now, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary, the definition of exposure is the fact or condition of being exposed, such as the condition of being presented to view or made known. In other words, getting exposure means making people aware of your design business. And once people are aware of you and of what you can offer them, they are much more likely to think of you the next time they need a designer. Think about it. If you wanted to order a pizza, and for some reason the regular pizza joint that you normally use is closed, but you still have that inkling for a good pizza, you would probably try ordering from the next place you're most aware of. Would you order from a pizza joint you had never heard about before, but you just found out maybe for the first time you did a Google search and there's this place that pops up and you've never even heard of them before? Would you order from them? Or would you choose to try the pizza place whose ads you've seen over and over, whose commercials you've seen on TV or you've heard them on the radio, and whose delivery vehicles you've spotted around town? Chances are you would choose the one you are most familiar with, even though that familiarity is only perceptual. Since you've never actually eaten their pizza before, you don't know if it's any good. But you're aware of them, so you're going to give them a try. You would choose them because you've been exposed to them. There's a whole industry based upon this principle of exposure. It's called advertising. Maybe you've heard of it. So, needless to say, the more you can get your name out there so that people can become familiar with you and with what you do, the more successful your design business will be. But how do you go about getting your name in front of people without spending a truckload of money on advertising? Well, you can barter for exposure. Now, I talked about bartering. This was way back in episode 47 of the podcast. Now, in that episode, I talked mostly about bartering for goods. For example, the cherry wood desk that I am sitting at right now, I acquired through bartering. I designed a website for a woodworking client, and in exchange, he built this desk for me. All I had to do was pay for the wood, but his services and my services were exchanged. That's bartering, exchanging one good or service for another without the exchange of money. And bartering for exposure works on the exact same principle, except instead of getting a physical product or a service back, you are compensated for your time and your skills and your effort through exposure. And that exposure could come in many forms, but it all comes down to a form of advertising. And let me tell you, it actually works. Every year, I design a t-shirt for a local children's dance studio, free of charge. I do make a little bit of money by providing the printed t-shirts. That's all part of my print brokering. And I talked about that way back in episode 49 of the podcast, if you want to know more about supplementing your design business income through print brokering. So I make a little bit of money off the t-shirts themselves, but I never actually charged her for the design of the shirt. In exchange, I get a full-page ad in their yearly dance recital program. That's a program that every family receives. And this is a huge dance studio, so lots and lots of families send their kids to this dance studio. So this gives me exposure to hundreds of people every year. Now, we've had this arrangement since I started my design business, and without fail, in the couple of weeks after every year's dance recital, I'm almost guaranteed to get at least one, and oftentimes several, inquiries from parents of the dancers saying, "Oh, I saw your ad in the program. Can you do this for me? Or can you do that?" And they don't all lead to be clients, but they are now aware of me. It has given me exposure. Our city of Cornwall, Ontario, used to host one of the largest hot air balloon festivals in North America. It folded a few years ago, which is a shame. It was a really great festival. Well, I was the designer for this festival. In fact, they were one of my biggest clients. And I did all sorts of things for them. And it paid me very well. But one of the arrangements we made early on was for me to offer them a discount on my prices in exchange for being listed as one of the event sponsors. Now, as a sponsor, that meant that my logo was prominent all over the place. It was on every printed piece they put out. I had my logo as a big 4x4 sign on the fence that surrounds the festival campground. It was repeated at regular intervals along the fence. I also had my logo wrapping one of the baskets to the hot air balloons. So on the basket that the people get into, they had these vinyl banners around the basket, and one of the balloons had my logo around the basket. So every time that balloon went up in the air, everybody around can see Marksman Design on the basket. Now, there were some other perks to that as well. Every year I got 2 tickets to go up in a hot air balloon. So we would take turns, and one time my wife and I went up. Another time it was my son and one of his friends went up. But we got 2 tickets every year. So that was all a perk. And all I did was I offered them a small discount on the rate that I was charging them. But it was giving me great exposure. In the township that I live in, our local fire hall has a firefighter challenge every year. And this is where they invite firefighters from all over the region to come and compete in these fun firefighter-like challenges. Well, when they hired me to be the designer for this firefighter challenge they hold every year, I suggested a deal with them. I would cap their bill at 5 hours of work. So it didn't matter how much time I spent designing on their stuff. I would only invoice them for 5 hours. Everything after that was just done free of charge. regardless of how much time I spent on their jobs. And in exchange for that, I wanted to be listed as a bronze sponsor for the event. Now, they had platinum, gold, silver, and bronze, so it was the lowest level sponsor. But still, to get to that level, I figured that the amount I was giving them, that would be the equivalent. So they agreed to put me as a bronze sponsor. And that meant that, again, Marksman Design, my company, was listed on all their promotional material, putting my name out there in front of everybody who was interested or showed up or saw the poster and all of that. Here's another instance. A few years ago, I was asked to design something for a charity Christmas fundraiser. This was a fundraiser where they had a dozen or so fully decorated Christmas trees, and they were going to auction them off. Well, they didn't have a lot of money, and they were asking me, like, what can I do? They don't have a big budget. Is there any way I can help them? And I knew this was a really good cause, and I wanted to help them out. So what I suggested was, in exchange for my services, I would not charge them. It wasn't a whole lot of work, but I said I would not charge them if they would list me as a sponsor for one of the trees that was being auctioned off. And as a sponsor, I would require them to put a sign in front of the tree saying that this particular tree was sponsored by Marksman Design. And the thing is, this is not something they had thought of. They thought it was such a good idea when I suggested it. First of all, they agreed right away. But then they went out and they found sponsors for all the other trees, raising even more money for the charity. Now, I have no idea how much they charged for those other sponsors, but it didn't cost me anything but my time. And it gave me great exposure. And the last story I want to share with you is a local theater company. I built their website for them and designed their posters, their ads, their tickets, and all the marketing material that they did for every play they put on. Now, I was already brokering all the print material, so I was making a little bit of money on all the posters and the tickets and everything. And I noticed right near the start when we started working together that their tickets were only printed on one side. The back of the tickets were blank. So I made them an offer. I told them I would not charge them for website hosting if they would let me put an ad on the back of their tickets. So the front of the ticket would promote the play, and the back of the ticket would be an ad for my services. I also told them that because it would obviously increase the cost of printing, I would cover that. But since I was already making money on the print run, it kind of broke even, so it didn't cost me anything out of pocket. So for every play that they put on, every ticket that they sold, the ticket holder had my ad on the back of the ticket. And I can tell you that over the years that we had this arrangement, I gained many new clients through that exposure. So I think you're kind of getting the point. In each of these cases, I took advantage of a way to get my name in front of more people who didn't already know about me. And the more people who saw it, the better the chances that they would call me the next time they needed a designer. Or the better the chance they would pass my name along the next time they heard of someone who needed a designer. Just like for a restaurant to succeed, people have to know about it. Well, your design business cannot succeed if people aren't aware of you. And one of the easiest ways to gain exposure is to take advantage of your current clients and barter a way to get your name out there through whatever you're doing for them. And even if this method only brings in 1 or 2 clients, those are clients you wouldn't have had otherwise. And the more you do this, the more it adds up. And I know that I've gained dozens of clients over the years, all because of the exposure I got from bartering with these clients to get my name out there. So whenever you do have this sort of opportunity, I suggest you barter for exposure. Talk to your clients. Figure out a way for you to get your name out there. Now, next week, I'm going to continue this bootstrap advertising series with more inexpensive ways for you to gain exposure. So if you're not already, please subscribe to the podcast in wherever you're listening to it right now. And that way you're sure not to miss the episode. Now, as I promised at the start, I want to share a resource of the week with you that will help you with exposure. And that resource is MailChimp, a great way for you to gain exposure through a newsletter. You got to remember that exposure isn't just for people who don't know about you. Exposure also helps those who are familiar with you in order to keep you top of mind for the next time they do require your services. Now, my favorite tool for creating newsletters is MailChimp. I know there are many out there, and I won't lie. The reason I like MailChimp is because of their free plan. They let you have up to 2,000 contacts before you have to pay anything, which means you can go a very long way into building your mailing list and getting your newsletter going before it starts costing you anything at all. And although, yes, there are many options that are not available on MailChimp's free plan that are only available in the paid plan, it is a great way for you to get started. And when you eventually do outgrow their free plan, you can then decide if you want to upgrade to one of MailChimp's paid plans, or you can even export your list and move to a completely different platform of your choosing. But if you don't already have a mailing list, which is a great way for you to keep in contact with your existing clients, send them an email, let them know what you're up to, what you can offer them. You never know. Sometimes all it takes is that little prod for them to go, oh, you know what? Yeah, you can help me with this project I've been thinking about. So that's just another way to get exposure. In this case, to people who already know who you are, but may not be thinking of you right now. If you're interested in checking out MailChimp, visit resourcefuldesigner.com/MailChimp. Now, before I sign off, I know some of you like to know a little bit about what I've been up to lately. Well, I've sent out a proposal for a website to a client. This is an existing client. I designed one website for her, and she was so impressed with it that she asked me to take a look at her existing, a different website, kind of related to the same company, but a different website for it. And she asked if there was any way I can update it. Her website was built several years ago, and she's just not quite happy with it anymore. So I sent her a proposal, waiting to hear back on that one. I had a couple of consulting calls this week. One of them for a design client that just wanted some advice on the direction they're going to take. Right now, we're not at any stage where anything's going to be designed. They just wanted my opinion on things. So I asked them to book a paid 1-hour consulting call, and we did that, and they seemed very happy with the outcome. The other one was for a podcast client. They just wanted an idea. They already had podcast artwork, and they wanted my opinion of it and some other things. So they weren't quite ready to get my audit service that I have, but they wanted to ask me some questions. So I said, well, I can do that during a consulting call. And they were happy to pay for that. And so we had a great time, talked for about 45 minutes there. It was only a half-hour consulting call, but it went over a little bit, and I was fine with that. And of course, podcast artwork have some really interesting ones this week. Actually, one of them that's right up our alley. It's a sublimation company is starting a podcast, and have asked me to design the artwork for them. And I just finished designing artwork for somebody who's talking about heart disease. That's one of the things I love about podcasts and working in this industry is the diversity of things. Like one day I might talk about somebody dealing with heart disease. The next time it's designing something for somebody in the financial space. I designed one for somebody who is a farmer and has a podcast about agriculture. All sorts of topics, all sorts of people. And I just love working in this space because of that diversity. So that's just a little bit of what I've been up to this week. Now, I would love to know what you've been up to. And even better, I'd love for you to share it in the Resourceful Designer community. The community is a great place for you to meet up and get to know fellow like-minded designers who are keen on building and growing their design business. We're all down-to-earth people sharing real actionable advice. None of these how to get rich quick schemes or how to make it super big as a designer. No, this is all actionable, real life people sharing their experiences, helping you, offering advice, and just offering support whenever you need it. And I can tell you from the people in the community, they keep telling me over and over how much they value this group of people they've gotten to know and in some cases call friends. So if you're looking for a small design community of, as I said, like-minded people who are in a similar boat to you, who just want to grow and succeed as a designer, then why don't you join the community? Visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community and join today. So I want to thank you for your time. Remember to tune in next week, same time, as I continue this bootstrap advertising series in order to help you get exposure for your business. Until then, I am Mark Decote, wishing you all the best with your design business. and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.